You know, sometimes life hits you with a moment so sharp, so clear, it changes the way you see humanity forever, and mine came, strangely enough, at a dog auction, the kind of place you only see in bad Western movies or local news reports, but this was real, the air thick with dust and the quiet shame of things being discarded. I hadn't planned on going, honest, I was just driving past the old Riverside Grange Hall when I saw the sign, surplus and service animals, and something heavy in my gut, something I'd been carrying since I got back from the sandbox, forced me to pull over. I found a spot way in the back, leaning against the cold cinder block wall, just watching. And then I saw him, a massive German shepherd, 7 years old, standing on the small wooden platform under a single, unforgiving fluorescent light. They called him Kaiser. His coat was still a regal sable, but his left hind leg was held slightly stiff, a permanent tremor running through it, a limp that wasn't weakness, but a scar, a terrible price paid. He wasn't aggressive, or scared, just confused, like a decorated general who'd been told his entire life's work was suddenly irrelevant. The auctioneer, a man named Bob with a permanent forced smile, started his spiel. Next up, Kaiser, retired K-9. Explosives and narcotics detection, 5 years decorated service with the Metro PD, slight injury, rear quarter, sustained in the line of duty, but still sharp as a tack. Bob waited, gavel hovering, and nothing. The room, maybe 100 people strong, mostly local ranchers and dog breeders, just went silent. A couple of guys near the front snickered. "Who wants a three-legged liability?" one of them muttered, loud enough to sting. "Probably cost more in vet bills than a new puppy." That's the moment the shame started to settle. Not my shame, but the collective indifference of the crowd, the way they looked at this animal, who had once stood between chaos and life, who had sniffed out enough explosives to save entire city blocks, like a broken lawnmower. Bob tried again, his cheer faltering. "Come on folks, starting bid, $100. We need 100. This dog saved lives." Still nothing. Kaiser just lowered his head, his big, noble ears drooping, and in that instant, I felt the exact same loneliness he did. You see, I'm Mick Vance, retired Army medic, and that feeling. I know it well. It's the feeling of being thanked on the tarmac, given a medal, and then quietly set aside because the war is over, and your function has expired. My personal ghost, the reason I was standing in that dusty room, was Hunter, my K-9 partner overseas. A loyal, goofy Labrador who had taken shrapnel saving my convoy. I was the medic, I was supposed to save him, but I couldn't. I held him until he stopped breathing, and the guilt has been the only constant companion I've had since. I promised myself I'd never look a working dog in the eye again, never bond, never risk that soul-shredding loss. But Kaiser broke that promise just by standing there. His eyes met mine, way in the back, and for a split second, I saw past the confusion. I saw the vigilance, the unspoken query, is there still a job for me? It was that look, the shared language of duty, that made my throat tighten. Just then, a man walked in and stood near the doorway, hands shoved deep in his pockets, jaw clenched. This was Officer Dan Reyes, Kaiser's former handler. He hadn't wanted to come, but his guilt was a loud, physical thing. He had fought the department, pleaded with the chief, but policy is policy. A dog with a permanent injury is a liability, surplus, unfit for service. He couldn't adopt Kaiser because, well, the official story was conflict of interest, but the truth was, his new captain, a greasy guy named Captain Thayer, hated the paperwork and wanted to send a message. Thayer had a deep, personal vendetta against K-9 units, always claiming they were a drain on the budget and too much of a liability, especially after Kaiser's incident had drawn too much bad press about heroics over procedure. Dan, trapped by his badge and his pension, stood there, silently apologizing to the dog who had taken a bullet for him. He whispered to himself, "I failed you, buddy," just as Bob, the auctioneer, reached the point of utter defeat. $30. Bob shouted, his voice cracking, "Final offer. $30, for a dog that took a bullet for his handler." 30. He was about to slam the gavel down, about to move on to a box of rusty tools, when I did it. I couldn't stop myself. The word came out soft, but it echoed like a thunderclap in the sudden silence. The drive to my place was quiet, just the hum of my old pickup and the steady breathing of Kaiser, or as I was starting to call him, Kaiser, because even a dog deserves a name with dignity. I'd bought a beat-up harness and leash, but I didn't rush him. He sat in the passenger seat, his head resting against the door, watching the pine forests of the Cascadia County flash by. He wasn't my dog yet, he was just an assignment I hadn't filed paperwork for. My cabin is small, nestled right on the edge of the deep woods near Blackwood Lake, the perfect place to forget, or maybe, to finally remember. When we got there, the smell of wood smoke and damp earth filled the air. I let him off the leash. "Go on, boy. You're free now," I murmured, sinking onto my porch step. He took a few limping steps, sniffed the dewy grass, and then, surprisingly, he turned around and came right back to my side, settling down with a deep sigh. He wasn't looking for freedom, he was looking for a partner. The next few weeks were just quiet. The kind of quiet that lets you hear your own thoughts for the first time in years. Kaiser and I fell into a routine. Me with my coffee, him patrolling the small perimeter. I noticed he never truly relaxed, always had one eye open, always listening. It was the vigilance of a professional. I'd sit by the fireplace, turning Hunter's scratched dog tag over and over in my hand, thinking about the desert, thinking about my failure, thinking about why I couldn't stop looking at Kaiser and seeing Hunter. One evening, it hit me hard. A terrible, cracking thunderstorm rolled in from the coast. The lightning split the sky, and the thunder shook the cabin windows so hard the glass rattled like a cheap snare drum. Kaiser sprang up, whimpering, not from fear, but from the memory of explosions and shrapnel. He pressed his massive body against my leg, his muscles twitching. I dropped Hunter's tag and wrapped my arms around Kaiser's neck, holding him tight. "Easy, buddy. I got you. I got you," I whispered, repeating the promise I couldn't keep for Hunter. In that moment, the wall I'd built around my heart, the one I'd needed to survive, finally gave way, and the guilt and the pain poured out. I realized I hadn't saved Kaiser, he was saving me, by letting me finally finish my duty to a partner. Life was simple, healing, until the knock. Or rather, the lack of one. It was a few weeks later, near midnight, a miserable drizzle outside. Kaiser, who was dozing by the fire, suddenly went rigid. His ears rotated forward like radar dishes. He let out a low, guttural rumble that didn't sound like a dog, it sounded like a growl from the earth itself. Thump, thump. Faint, irregular footsteps on my porch. My soldier's instinct kicked in. I moved to the window, silently, my heart hammering a steady rhythm. The power was out, plunging the cabin into absolute darkness. I grabbed the old oak baseball bat I keep near the door. The back door splintered inward with a sickening crash, and two masked figures burst in, beams of flashlights cutting the dark. "Stay down. Where's the safe?" one yelled, waving a rusty crowbar. "Take what you want." I yelled back, holding up my hands, trying to buy time, "Just calm down." But Kaiser didn't wait for a command. He launched. The sound was terrifying, a battle roar that wiped away every memory of the quiet, limping dog. He was pure, focused fury. He locked onto the arm of the nearest intruder, teeth sinking deep. The man shrieked, dropping his flashlight, which spun across the floor, painting the room in brief, chaotic strobes of light. The second man swung the crowbar. It struck Kaiser's side with a dull, sickening impact. "Kaiser!" I roared, and the pain in my voice was real. I rushed forward, swinging the bat, connecting with a jarring thwack that knocked the crowbar out of the man's grasp. The fight was brutal, clumsy, and fast, fueled by adrenaline and fear. The man Kaiser had bitten stumbled back, panicked, and bolted into the rain. The second one, seeing his chance evaporate, followed. Silence. Only the sound of the rain and my own ragged breathing. I dropped the bat and scrambled to Kaiser, who was lying near the fireplace, chest heaving, his flank bleeding badly. His eyes, however, were wide open, locked on mine, waiting for confirmation. I dropped to my knees, holding his head. "You did it, boy," my voice trembled, "you saved us. You are not broken. You are a hero." Just then, the wail of distant sirens cut through the storm. And then, through the wreckage of my doorway, Daniel Reyes appeared, his uniform drenched, his eyes wide with shock. He'd recognized the address on the dispatch. He dropped to his knees beside me as the paramedics rushed past us to treat Kaiser. "He's lost a lot of blood," a medic shouted. Daniel looked at me, his face streaming with rain and tears. "You bought him. You saved him," he choked out. I shook my head, my eyes fixed on my dog's pale face. "No, Dan," I whispered, "he saved me." Hours later, sitting in the hard plastic chairs of the Cascadia Animal Clinic, Daniel and I waited. We didn't talk about policies, or Captain Thayer's petty rules, or liability. We talked about loyalty. When the vet finally came out, she smiled, tiredly, "He's a fighter. It was close, but he's going to make it." I put my face in my hands, finally letting go of the weight I'd carried for years. A few days later, word got out. The story of the discarded dog who took down armed burglars despite his injuries became national news. The Metro PD, sensing a PR disaster turning into a PR goldmine, reversed course. They arranged a full ceremony. Standing on the steps of the precinct, under the cheers of hundreds of people, Kaiser, wearing his new collar, polished to a shine, received the Medal of Valor and Service, flanked by two men, Officer Daniel Reyes, who finally got to stroke his partner's head in public, and me, Michael Vance, the quiet stranger who had bought a second chance for $30. As the cameras flashed, Daniel leaned down, his voice thick with emotion, "I guess you never stopped working, partner. Welcome home." I looked out at the crowd, at the officers saluting, and I realized the real story wasn't the medal or the bullet. It was the simple truth that sometimes, the things society throws away are the things that hold the most value. They just need someone to look at them not with pity, but with respect.